It's been such great crowds today. It's been so fun. Well, my name's Helen. I'm going to be narrating for this very special demonstration called Inspired by Dig Deeper. We also have Manny here is going to be on the assist, and Michael Beam is going to be our master glassworker. But for this particular demonstration, let me just check. Has anyone seen the Dig Deeper exhibit upstairs yet? A couple of you, fantastic. Well, we start out this video with, or this demo with a little bit of a video, so I'm going to pop that on for you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Larson, curator of ancient glass here at the Corning Museum of Glass. I'm also an archaeologist and the curator of the special exhibition.
I'm going to start it again, just so.
Hi, I'm Catherine Larson, curator of ancient glass here at the Corning Museum of Glass. I'm also an archaeologist and the curator of the special exhibition, Dig Deeper, Discovering an Ancient Glass Workshop. Dig Deeper is an exhibition about the way archaeologists work with scientists and glass artists to understand ancient glass. I hope you'll have the chance to see it during your visit. As I was working on the exhibition, I really wanted to share that process of discovery with our hot glass team and with you, our visitors. So I asked the hot glass team to build a wood-fired furnace similar to the ones that would have been used in the ancient world. And they said yes. Fortunately, we didn't have to start entirely from scratch, and we were able to talk to colleagues and friends who had built similar furnaces and learn from their successes and failures. We discovered that our greatest challenges, things like making the dog material, a mix of straw and wood-fired ceramic to build the furnace, that was hard for us because we'd never done it before. But it would have been really simple in the ancient world since it was such a common building material. No one was more surprised than us when the furnace worked beautifully as it was designed. We were able to melt and blow glass after just a few hours of bringing up the temperature. Even an untrained person like me was able to keep the furnace stoked to temperatures above 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Our gaffers will often say that glass blowing process is largely unchanged from 2,000 years ago, when glass blowing first started in the ancient Roman world. And that's true. But the wood-fired furnace project helped us all realize that what happens at the end of the blowpipe is only a small part of the story.
All right, so as this continues to roll, Michael's going to go ahead and get started on an actual piece. And throughout this demonstration, we really want to look at the differences between ways of working in an ancient style and some of the modern conveniences that we have. Now, one thing that we noticed right away is that ancient glassmakers typically did not have workbenches like we have here. They would just put slats of wood and roll the pipes right onto their feet, or right onto their thighs rather, and just reheat and be really close to the furnace, stepping back and forth constantly, not having a separate working chamber like we have here at high temperatures, just using the opening from the furnace itself. Another thing that we need to make sure with those ancient styles is, of course, to continually feed the furnace. There's only so much temperature that we can reach without continuing to feed wood into the furnace at all times. So it did require a whole separate person just to monitor the firebox, being able to continue with high quality wood to be able to reach those 2,000 degree temperatures that we need. Now in modern times, we're really using gas fire here. And if you've seen a show up in our innovations area, that's all electric. So there's a lot of ways of melting glass. But it really came down to the design of the furnace and the wood that we used to be able to stoke those fires. Now you can see a copy of our original furnace. We had that first trial run, and then we had a second year run, which was this summer, and we built a slightly more technologically advanced one to survive the summer. But we have a really great exhibition up in the innovations area called Get Stoked, and it has the original furnace up there that you can take a close look at. Well, let's catch up back with Michael here. He's already got a beautiful starter bubble on the end of the iron. Now, he did gather out of our small furnace on the left side here that has blue glass in it. We add a bit of copper in with the raw materials of silica sand, soda ash, and limestone, and that'll create a beautiful copper blue color, very similar to this picture down here in front. Now, typically we melt only clear molten glass, and that's what our big furnace here is here. This furnace holds about 1,000 pounds of glass. I've got another little video here I'll show you, which shows the inside of that furnace. So the upper chamber has the gas fire flames, and then the bottom half is a big ceramic bowl called a crucible, holding about 1,000 pounds of glass. The tiny furnace that we worked out of outside this summer, and that wood ancient furnace, that was only about 10 to 15 pounds of glass at a time. So much smaller scale, so we made a lot smaller objects. But now that he's got a second gather, or what we call a second layer of glass, he's able to move forward on the shaping and making a piece fairly quickly and efficiently. He used wet wooden tools to help shape center and cool that glass, making sure that all those layers were nice and even, and making sure that nothing catches on fire because we have water involved in those wooden products. Wood typically does catch on fire as we use to fuel our furnace, but we can use dry or wet wood tools to help shape our glass, and that's been a very common theme for many, many years. Now, another modern take, as I mentioned, is the way that we reheat our glass. Ancient glassmakers would just sit right in front of the furnace, have one door so that they would gather out of that port and reheat at that same opening. That way you only had to build one fire rather than multiple ones. But modern studios typically have an entire second reheating chamber that runs also at around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit or about 1150 Celsius. Those furnaces do not have any glass inside of them, so they can typically be turned off at night when we're not using them to help conserve energy. And the electric version that we have upstairs, we just turn that one down at night because it does take a much longer time. Electric's a little pokey, just like our gas and electric stoves at home. Now, another modern convenience that Michael has chosen to use is the blow hose that you see here. Now, with that blow hose, he's attached it to the far end of the pipe, and there's a pedal down below. As he taps on the pedal, it pushes about 2 pounds of compressed air into that hose and allows him to inflate at the same time that he's down manipulating, guiding, and watching that bubble expand. So those are some of the things that we really have luxuries here in modern times. Being able to have a much bigger furnace, much bigger footprint, much bigger workspace, and we can accommodate much larger work in general. Now we can see from our illustration here that Michael is going for one of these folded footed bowls. Now if you have seen the exhibition upstairs, you've probably seen quite a few of these folded things. Those ancient glass blowers really love to fold glass. So we've got here a lip that's been folded back onto itself. The foot has a little fold onto itself. But this foot was added as a second bubble and then folded and opened up into that form. But for the object that Michael's going to be making, he's going to form the foot out of the same bubble. So just getting and focusing heat on the bottom half of that area. All glass making is heat dependent. So we get it hot where we want to see change. We keep it slightly cooler and more rigid where we don't want it to change. So at this point, the top edge of his bubble near the pipe is already stable. He's not getting that hot and flopping, just the bottom half. So he can cut in this nice cut design. Even using a bit of gravity to draw it out just a little longer to make it taller and easier to get the tools in. Now the glass making tools, the jacks that we use, those have been around since the invention of glass blowing about 2,000 years ago. So they haven't changed much except for the fine metals that we use to make them. Early versions were believed to be sheep shears. But a lot of metal tools don't really survive history. They get remelted, turned into other things, so we don't have a lot of ancient tools in our collections. But here we go, squeezing in a tight constriction, squeezing it down with the paddle, and we've got a beautiful contact on the bottom, creating that folded foot. And we also have a few really fun pictures I'll show you really quickly up on the screen. This is a bowl that Chris, who happened to be working on the side bench there, he made a bowl earlier in the season, then cut it in half, polished it, so we could get a really good side profile view of that technique. So you can see how the lip itself is folded back and the foot itself is folded back. But if we were to pour water into these bowls, it wouldn't go to the very edge of the foot. It's sealed right up against the bubble itself. So it's almost like our more traditional vessel that adds a whole separate unit onto the bottom. So now that they've gotten the bottom half of this piece done, it's time to reshape the top half. And in order to do that, we need to remove this from the original blowpipe and trade it over onto a secondary iron called a puntee. Puntees are connections that are done in a delicate and temporary way. So hopefully we can exploit that weak connection and remove it easily at the end of the process. But this process will always leave a little scar mark on the very bottom of the piece. So if we're looking for those handmade pieces, we can look for the little scar mark that's left from the process that you see. But as I mentioned, we do need to break some glass. And how many folks out there have broken glass before? Almost everybody. Now I'm going to venture to guess that it was easy to break, but it didn't break in a predictable way. So that's one of the biggest challenges for glass makers, getting glass to break, but break where you want it. So we just weaken the glass. Weak things tend to break easily. So he's put a tight constriction line at the very top, and now we'll add a drop of water right on that line, and a little tap is all it should take. Beautiful job. Let's get the team a big round of applause for that. Fantastic. Now before I put this residual glass away, I just want to point out here that you look at the end of this, the leftover glass, this is called a moil. And you see all that kind of donut shape that's formed where we broke it free and now we've got a hole through both things because it was a hollow bubble? Well, when they were excavating this Jalame site, they were finding a lot of glass shrapnel, a lot of broken pieces, and didn't exactly know what they were looking at. So they brought glass blowers or glass makers into that conversation, and we started to be able to identify small little things. So if you take a look at this here, this is some of the scraps that they were finding. Now, if we look really carefully on the one in the middle, on the far left, you can see a little bit of metal attached to that curve. And you can see it's kind of a lot of half donuts, right? So it's the moils that were coming off of pipes, breaking and then having that in the glass pile. That tells us that not only were they melting large quantities of glass at this site, they were also making objects from that same glass. Now the Jalame site was originally just mostly a place that they were melting very large furnaces worth of glass. And then they would allow the entire tank of glass to cool down. They'd break away the bricks, break the glass into chunks, and then sell those chunks off to other glass blowers to make things from. And in some ways, that's how we work these days too. We order our glass off the internet. It arrives to us in 50-pound bags, pre-made by a manufacturer that collects all those raw materials in one place. So ancient glass-making sites were often built up around where they would find those raw materials or the heat source, the wood, the coal, and eventually the gas and electric. So getting fancy, went for a second fold there right on the top. Now another fun little thing that they were seeing a lot of were these kind of objects. And they look pretty unassuming, just little drips of glass. But if you look really carefully, there's things inside those little drips, right? So what are those little drips? Well, when we're working with a wood-fired furnace, we often, of course, have a lot of soot, a lot of dirt that's flying around in our chamber full of glass. And so sometimes those little chunks will land into the pot, and then when you go to gather, you end up gathering that little chunk right out of the furnace. Or maybe even a little piece of the furnace itself fell into the glass. So when we're looking at those little pieces, and we get those little chunks left into our glass, we can kind of pick them out. So if we have a small gather, and I would say, oh no, I got a piece of furnace in there. Well, I can just kind of reach in with my tweezers, grab it, and pull it away. And there we've got that same kind of little drip that we see in piles. So again, another sign of the interaction of the glassmaker into the process of identifying what all those parts and pieces were. So doing a beautiful job getting this nice and open. He's already folded the lip. Now we just need to finish out that curve. And then we're gonna add, are we gonna add a couple handles or we're not? Yeah, okay, awesome. So I'll just ask really quickly, do we have any questions so far? Anything I can answer really quickly while we're finishing up the top section of our piece? Yes, nice and loud for me, please.
I have a question that when the glass breaks, let's say God forbid that breaks, can you then recycle that glass for future use?
Great question. So if we were to have things that break or some of our scraps, can we remelt them? Can we reuse that glass? Absolutely. In theory, glass is infinitely remeltable, and it's a lot more energy efficient to remelt glass than it is from those raw materials of silica, sand, soda ash, and limestone. So we typically recycle as much clean, clear glass as we can. If you've seen a clear demonstration piece today, chances are it's going to be remelted and put back into our furnace. But colored scraps end up contaminating our beautiful tank of clear glass. So even though they could be remelted, we typically don't here. So we'll recycle those as more of an aggregate in the local community, crushing it up, putting it into concrete or countertops, and maybe pulled into thin insulation for your home and various uses like that. Great question. Any others? Okay, if you think of anything after the show, you're also welcome to come down. So now that we've got that beautiful flare, look at this, just a little bit faster of a spin, whips that glass away from center. But he had to get exactly this perfect setup to get that beautiful curve to happen in just the right way. Are we doing traditional or hot handles? Traditional, all right. So we have a couple options in the way that we work with glass. And ancient glass makers didn't end up having these things called scissors. Now we know scissors existed at that time, but they just weren't prevalent in glass making. So modern glass workers are able to use shears to cut and attach things. So Michael's going to make a beautiful handle in more of a traditional, contemporary way. We've taken a small amount of glass, pre-formed it slightly, even creased it with a couple lines in the tweezer, giving it some beautiful dimension and ridges along that piece of glass. We need to make sure that the vessel doesn't get too cold as we're waiting for that handle. We don't want it moving, but we don't want it cracking. So he uses a torch to just give a little insurance heat. But you can see a little touch down, stretch it up, cut it free. Oh, he's going to attach it there. Oh, you are doing the hot version. And then just string it away and break it free. Beautiful job. Let's give him a little round of applause. Very nice. So ancient glass makers didn't have, again, those shears. So this is a little picture of exactly what Michael just did. Just using the heat of the material itself, you pull it quickly so that you can get it to a really thin thread, and then using your cold tweezers to break that little thread away. So you'll see a lot of these little threads in some of these ancient pieces you'll see up in that Dig Deeper exhibit. And that's, again, a facilitation of removing the glass without having shears to be able to cut it. Now, what's harder than one handle? Two handles, right? So we got to get another handle added, and this is really coming down to Manny in a lot of ways. He's going to be try to be as consistent as possible, bringing the same amount of glass, the same shape, the same time, the same temperature, and that will make Michael's job a lot easier in making those matching handles. Now the first one, he could kind of willy-nilly make whatever size he wanted. But the second one, we need to make sure that it's similar. So he'll probably even cut it a little shorter so that he can stretch it to the final shape that he wants. There's a couple little tricks to be able to create consistency. But really, practice, practice, practice gives you consistency. Michael's been blowing glass for about 13 years. So he has a lot of really great skills and practice. We say it takes at least 5 years of consistent working just to be a good beginner in glass making, understanding those basic principles of how things are going to work and be able to get the things that you're hoping out off the end of the iron. So pull, break the thread, bonus thread, there we go, beautiful. What do you think, folks? I think you handled that pretty well. Very nice. So now that we have our shape, the final step is the cooling of that item. Modern times, we have electric ovens. We can program the controller to hold that temperature all day long, 960 degrees Fahrenheit. We can keep loading all the work. And then at the end of the day, we tell it how many degrees per hour to go down to room temperature to allow our glass to cool at a pace where any thick and thin can shrink at a nice consistent level. But in ancient times, they didn't have electric ovens, so they would, at a bare minimum, bury things in sand just to insulate them enough to help them cool slowly. Or they would build chambers, so an extra little chamber on the top of the furnace, or maybe a couple little chambers to the side, so the exhaust air can be heating a chamber that will also allow it to get colder and colder. So one final flash to make sure all of our temperatures are balanced, and then we'll be able to remove it with that delicate connection. Remember that punny was added a little colder with the intention of it breaking away very easily at the end and only leaving a small little scar mark on the bottom of the piece. Now there's usually a little bit of sharpness to those little scar marks, so we can also use a torch to spot heat that very end. Glass, when it gets hot, wants to ball up and round up. So any little sharpness left over will be easily fixed with just a little bit of heat. So there goes our water, not on the piece, but just on the connection, and a tiny little tap. Look how easy that broke off. Very nicely done. Fantastic. So this will be tucked away with the rest of the work that we've made today and be able to cool down nice and slowly overnight. Beautiful ancient bowl. Let's give Michael a big round of applause. Fantastic. So again, this was our Inspired by Dig Deeper. If you want to take a look at that original furnace, it's up in the Innovations area. There's a really lovely exhibit called Dig Deeper upstairs in the 35 Centuries Gallery. If you look on your map, it says Special Exhibition Space. That's where you'll find it, right at the entrance. And there's some great video up there as well of our team working from that wood-fired furnace throughout the summer. So thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show and have a great day here at the Corning Museum of Glass.